Alright, so before we saw how to, before we saw how to factor a polynomial or a quadratic in the form ax squared plus bx plus c, and we saw how to do it when a was 1. But today we're going to be looking at how to do it when a is not 1. So in other words, when a is anything besides 1. It's still going to be in this form, but the a is not going to be 1, which means we follow all of the same steps. Put in standard form, factor out the GCF. If the first term is negative, factor out a negative GCF. Multiply a and c, so this thing right here, the x, and then find the factors of ac whose sum is b, so multiply up here, add down here, and then fill out these two numbers. And factor by grouping. This was the step we've been able to skip so far. However, when a is not 1, this cannot be skipped. Alright, so I briefly showed you all how to do this when we did it when a was 1. But now I'm going to show you how to do this when a is not 1. And it's the same process, but you don't get to skip it this time. So in this one, number 1, our GCF is 1, so there's nothing to factor out. So we're going to set up the x, and the top of the x is going to be my a times c. In this case, my a is 8, so it's no longer 1. My b is 14, my c is 3, so my a is no longer 1. So a times c, that's positive 24. And then b is positive 14. So the two numbers that I'm looking for that multiply to positive 24 and add to positive 14 are positive 12, positive 2. 12 times 2 is 24, 12 plus 2 is 14. Alright, so what this means is that now I have to factor by grouping, because I can't skip the factor by grouping step. And factor by grouping says that I'm going to split 14x into 12x and 2x. So I'm going to rewrite the problem 8x squared, except instead of 14x, I'm going to write positive 12x, positive 2x, and I got those from here. And then plus 3. So the a and c are the same, but I've split the b term into 12 and 2. Alright, now factor by grouping tells me that I'm going to have two groups added together, and the first group is going to be the first two terms, so 8x squared plus 12x, and the second group is going to be the second two terms, 2x plus 3. And now I need to factor the GCF out of each of these groups. This group, these two terms have a GCF, and these two terms have a GCF. Now, very important when you're doing this is, regardless of what the GCF is, it has to come out. So even if it's 1, we're still going to bring it out. That's just how we do this. So 8x squared and 12, well, 8 and 12 have a GCF of 4. 4 goes into 8, 4 goes into 12. X squared and x have a GCF of x. And then over here, 2 and 3, they have a GCF of 1. So I'm going to factor 4x out of the first group. I'm going to factor 1 out of the second group. Okay, so what that means is I'm just going to be dividing these two terms by 4x, the GCF, and these two terms by 1. Alright, well, I'm left with 2x here. 8 divided by 4 is 2. X squared divided by x is x. And over here, I'm left with 12 divided by 4, which is 3, because the x's cancel. Over here, I didn't really factor anything out, just a 1, so it's going to stay the same. Dividing each of these by 1s leaves it the same. Alright, and now what I have is two terms that are each a product of two polynomials. This is a product of two polynomials, this is a product of two polynomials, or two factors. But the point is, they both have a factor in common. They both have 2x plus 3 in common, which means that I can factor 2x plus 3 out of them. Okay, so if I factor 2x plus 3 out of them, then the first one, I'm left with 4x, and the second one, I'm left with 1. So my factored form is 2x plus 3, 4x plus 1. These are the two factors to 8x squared plus 14x plus 3. So I'm pretty much done here. So that's basic step for factor by grouping. Group them into two, GCF comes out of each, and then you pull out the polynomial, the factor, to the outside, and then these two are what's left. So 4x here and 1 here. Let's try it on number 2. Alright, so number 2, we check the GCF, of course. The GCF is 1. Alright, so A is 3, B is -5, C is 2. We're going to set up our cross. Up top in our cross is A times C, which is 3 times 2, so that's positive 6. And the bottom is B, which is -5. We're looking for two numbers. Multiply to positive 6, add to -5. That's -6. Nope. Wrong. What I meant to say was -3 and -2. -3 times -2 is positive 6. -3 plus -2 is -5. So this tells me that this middle term is going to be split into -3x and -2x. So I'm going to have 3x squared minus 3x minus 2x, and then plus 2. Alright, factor by grouping. I'm going to put the first two terms together, plus I'll put the second two terms together. So the first two terms are 3x squared minus 3x. And the second two terms are -2x plus 2. Alright, I'm going to factor the GCF out of each of these groups. Factor the GCF out of the first group. And I'm going to factor the GCF out of the second group. GCF of the first group, 3 and 3, is 3. X squared and x is x. And the second group, 2 and 2, would be 2. But the first term is negative, so the rule still applies. A -2 must be the GCF. Okay, very important. If either of these, well, actually, it's just going to be this one. If this one has a first term that's negative, just like always, the GCF must be negative. So I'm going to factor 3x out of the first group, and I'll have something left over. And I'm going to factor -2 out of the second group, and I will have something left over. Okay, so if I factor 3 out of the first group, 3x, I'm left with, just divide these by 3x, I'm left with x minus 1. And if I factor -2 out of the first group, I'm also left with x minus 1. Alright, well these two terms have two factors each. They have a factor in common, x minus 1. So x minus 1 can come out, and what I have left is what's in red, 3x minus 2. And this is my factored form. X minus 1, 3x minus 2. That's the factored form for 3x squared minus 5x plus 2. Alright, so make sure you are showing your work for these problems. No work, no credit clearly says this. It's the worksheet that is on Canvas. We're doing the first 5 problems.